The elevator doors slide open. You step in with your phone in your hand, even though there's nothing to look at. In the mirror, the same version of you. Put together enough to look functional, tired enough to know you're not. A notification from a friend pops up on the screen. "We closed the deal!" You freeze for half a second, clear the notification without replying. At dinner, someone asks what you've been up to. The table stays quiet 2 seconds longer than it should. You answer on autopilot, "I'm in transition, researching, exploring options." The line comes out worn out. You hear your own voice and finally notice what you've been avoiding. Even you don't buy it anymore. There's a point where "I'm still figuring it out" snaps. Not on the outside, on the inside. That's where philosophy never really lands it. The exact moment when freedom to choose turns into shame for dragging it out. That's the point we're about to press on. And once you see it, you're the one who decides if you walk back into the elevator pretending nothing shifted, or not. Not because you need something specific. The cursor blinks, and for a second you don't even know what you're about to type. Then your fingers move anyway. Best careers for... You don't finish. Backspace. Try again. How to find your purpose in your... You skim the first result. Open a second. Close both. An hour passes. You close the laptop with the specific feeling of someone who has been very busy doing absolutely nothing. The notebook on your desk is still blank. The coffee went cold 30 minutes ago. The question you started with is exactly where you left it. This is not a focus problem, not a discipline problem. You don't need a better morning routine or a productivity app or a journal with the right prompts. What's happening is older than that, quieter. It has been running in the background of your life for longer than you want to count. Here's what nobody names directly. The search itself has become the destination. Not what you find at the end of it. The searching, the motion of looking. And somewhere between the first tab and the 40th, the question shifted, without you noticing, from "What do I actually want?" to "How do I keep moving without having to answer that?" The searching feels like progress. It has the texture of effort, but effort and movement are not the same thing, and you already know that. You've known it for a while. That's the part worth sitting with. There's a name for what you're doing, and it's not searching. Searching implies movement towards something, a direction, a destination you're actually trying to reach. What most people are doing, what you might be doing right now, is something different. It's the performance of searching. The costume of someone who is on the way somewhere, without any actual intention of arriving. This is not an accusation. It's a description. You know the feeling. You've spent entire weekends consuming content about purpose, about meaningful work, about the kind of life that feels real. And by Sunday night, nothing has changed except the number of browser tabs you've closed. The question is still there. The life is still the same shape. Here's what nobody wants to name directly. The search has become a way of avoiding the thing the search is supposed to find. Because finding something, actually landing on something, requires a different kind of courage than looking. Looking is safe. You can always say you're still figuring it out. You can always say the answer isn't clear yet. You can keep the possibility of the right life open indefinitely, as long as you never actually choose one. The search protects you from the terror of commitment. And somewhere along the way, you stopped noticing that was what it was doing. Marcus has 43 tabs open. He's not reading any of them. He opened the first one 6 weeks ago, an article about career transitions. Then one about freelancing. Then one about whether it's too late to go back to school at 34. Then a Reddit thread. Then a YouTube video he never finished watching. Then 3 more articles he bookmarked and never opened again. His girlfriend walks past the desk. "Still researching?" she asks. "Just figuring some things out," he says. She doesn't respond. She's heard that sentence for 2 years. Marcus closes the laptop. He tells himself he'll come back to it when he has more clarity. He's been waiting for that clarity for 2 years also. The tabs are still open. They'll be there tomorrow. He finds that comforting in a way he can't quite name. That last detail is the one worth holding on to. He finds it comforting, not productive, not useful, comforting. The open tabs aren't a research strategy. They're a security blanket, a way of feeling like the question is still being worked on, without the risk of actually answering it. Here's what's actually happening underneath the searching, not the surface version, not "I'm figuring out my purpose" or "I need more clarity before I commit." The actual mechanism. The one running quietly behind every tab, every framework, every notebook you filled and left on a shelf. The search is doing a job. And the job isn't finding anything. The job is protection. As long as you are searching, you are not failing. You are not the person who tried something and it didn't work. You are not the person who committed to a direction and discovered it was wrong. You are still the person with potential, undefined, untested, intact. Potential is safe. Results are not. Results can be judged. Potential can only be imagined. And the imagination is always more generous than reality. So the search continues, not because the answer isn't there, but because the moment you stop searching and start doing, the protection disappears. You become someone who is trying, and someone who is trying can fail. The searching doesn't feel like fear. That's the part worth sitting with. It feels like diligence, like responsibility, like you're being careful not to waste your life on the wrong thing. But diligence is a feeling. So is paralysis. And from the inside, they feel almost identical. Sarah has 14 notebooks. Not 14 notebooks she finished. 14 notebooks she started. The first one is from 4 years ago. It has a vision board glued to the inside cover. Magazine cutouts of a woman at a desk that looks like a loft, a passport with stamps, a coffee cup next to a laptop. Below the vision board, in her own handwriting. This is the year I stopped waiting. That was 4 years ago. The other 13 notebooks have similar openings. Different handwriting. Looser some years, more controlled in others, but the same basic architecture. A declaration, a plan, a list of steps. None of the notebooks make it past page 30. Her roommate once picked one up off the coffee table and flipped through it. "You write really well," she said. "Thanks," Sarah said. She put the notebook back on the shelf, next to the others. Here's the detail that matters. She didn't throw them away, she kept them. All 14, lined up on a shelf where she can see them every morning. That's not nostalgia, that's evidence. Evidence that she was always about to begin and never quite did. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The search isn't failing, it's working exactly as designed. It's doing its job with quiet precision, and its job was never to find anything. Think about what the search actually delivers. Every time you open a new article, watch another video, fill another notebook, you get something real. A feeling of movement, a sense of being responsible with your life, the identity of someone who takes this seriously, who doesn't just rush in, who is careful. That's not nothing, that's a lot actually. And here's the inversion that most people miss entirely. The more intelligent you are, the better the search works as protection. Because intelligent people can always find one more angle to consider. One more variable that hasn't been accounted for. One more reason why now isn't quite the right moment. The search doesn't feel like fear because it's wearing the costume of diligence. But underneath the diligence, underneath the notebooks and the tabs and the frameworks, there is something that doesn't want to be tested. Something that has decided, without announcing it, that staying in motion is safer than arriving somewhere. Because arrival means accountability. Arrival means you chose this, and you can be held to what you chose. The search protects the part of you that never wants to be that exposed, and it does it so smoothly that you've been thanking it. Sartre wrote something most people read once and move past. Man is condemned to be free, not invited, not encouraged, condemned. Because freedom, real freedom, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like weight. Like responsibility you can't hand to anyone else, like a decision that has your name on it and no one else's. The search was supposed to lighten that weight. Instead, it became the weight itself. You didn't find freedom in the research. You found a way to feel busy inside it, and the condemned part, that's the part worth sitting with. You don't get to opt out of choosing. Every day you spend searching instead of deciding is still a choice, a quiet one, an invisible one. But a choice. Here's the cost nobody puts in writing. Every year you spend searching instead of committing, is a year you file under transition, a year that doesn't fully count yet, a year you're still preparing for the real thing. Except the real thing never arrives on its own. You have to show up for it while you're still unsure, while the answer is still incomplete, while the fear is still present. That's the part the search never told you. You've been waiting for the fear to leave before you begin. But the fear doesn't leave first. It leaves, if it leaves at all, after you've already started. After you've already made yourself accountable to something real. Think about what 5 years of transition actually costs. Not in abstract terms. In concrete ones. 5 years of telling people you're figuring things out. 5 years of first pages and abandoned notebooks. 5 years of conversations where you describe a life you haven't started yet. 5 years where the story you tell about yourself is always set in the future tense. That's not a strategy, that's a pattern. And patterns don't break by understanding them. They break when you make a different choice, a small one, a real one, before you feel ready. Readiness is not a feeling that arrives. It's a decision you make without it. Daniel has a box under his bed. Inside the box, a hard drive with 3 years of podcast recordings he never edited. A business plan he wrote in a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon when everything felt possible. 2 notebooks, a USB cable for a microphone he still owns. He doesn't open the box, but he doesn't throw it away either. His roommate once asked what was in it. "Just old stuff," Daniel said. That was the right answer. And also completely wrong. The box isn't storage, it's a museum. A carefully preserved collection of every moment he almost began. He moves it when he vacuums. Sets it back in the same spot. Exactly the same spot. There's something important in that detail. He knows where it is at all times. He hasn't forgotten it. He hasn't moved on. The box stays close enough to feel like proximity to possibility, without the risk of actually opening it and having to decide what comes next. The box is doing the same job as the open tabs, the same job as the 14 notebooks. It keeps the question alive without forcing an answer. Here's the inversion nobody wants to sit with. You've been treating the uncertainty as a temporary condition, something between you and the life you're supposed to be living. A waiting room, a phase. But what if the uncertainty isn't the obstacle? What if it became the identity? Think about what happens when someone asks what you do, not professionally, but in the larger sense. What you're building, where you're headed. Watch the answer that comes out. It's probably some version of still figuring it out, in transition, working on something. That answer used to feel honest. At some point, it stopped being a description and became a position, because figuring it out is a socially protected state. Nobody pushes back on it. Nobody holds you accountable for it. It sounds responsible. It sounds self-aware. It gives you full permission to remain exactly where you are while appearing to be in motion. The chaos stopped being something you were moving through. It became something you were living inside of, permanently, because living inside it had its own logic, its own comfort, its own kind of identity. You became the person who is always about to begin. And that person never has to answer for not having begun. That's not a transition. That's a residence. Here's what Sartre actually meant, and it's not what the philosophy classes made it sound like. He wasn't talking about the freedom to do whatever you want. He was talking about something much more uncomfortable than that. He was talking about the specific terror that comes from knowing, really knowing, that there is no script, no predetermined path, no cosmic plan that will eventually reveal what you're supposed to do with your life. Nothing is waiting to be discovered. Everything has to be chosen. That distinction matters more than it sounds. When you're searching, reading, researching, consuming framework after framework, part of you is looking for permission, a sign that this is the right direction, an authority that will confirm the choice so you don't have to carry the full weight of making it alone. But that confirmation never comes. Not because it's hidden, because it doesn't exist. The anxiety you feel when you sit with a blank page, or a blank week, or a blank life, that's not a symptom of confusion. That's the feeling Sartre was describing. The raw weight of being free, with no excuse to hide behind. Most people spend their entire lives building elaborate systems to avoid feeling that weight directly. The search is one of those systems. It's a very convincing one. Here's the part that makes this harder to name. The searching doesn't just feel like diligence. It has been praised by people around you, by a culture that rewards the appearance of thoughtfulness. You've been told your whole life that being careful is a virtue, that rushing in is reckless, that people who think before they act are the wise ones. So when you spend another month researching instead of deciding, it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like wisdom. It feels like exactly what a responsible adult is supposed to do. And that's the trap. The doubt got promoted. It stopped being a temporary condition and became a character trait you're proud of. I'm someone who doesn't rush. I'm someone who thinks things through. Those sentences sound mature, they sound measured, they sound like someone who has learned from their mistakes. But there's a version of those sentences that nobody says out loud. I'm someone who has been thinking things through for 4 years and hasn't moved. The virtue became the excuse. And the worst part is that the people around you keep confirming it. They nod when you say you're still figuring it out. Nobody pushes back. Nobody says the uncomfortable thing. So the searching continues, dressed in the costume of wisdom. Sartre wrote one more thing worth sitting with. We are our choices, not our intentions, not our research, not the notebooks we filled or the tabs we left open. Our choices. And here's what that cuts open. Every day you spend searching without deciding is still a choice. The absence of commitment is its own kind of commitment. You chose the open tab. You chose the 14th notebook. You chose the box under the bed. You chose the search over the arrival. That's not a judgment. It's a description of what's been happening. And now that you can see it clearly, now that the mechanism has a name, the question changes. It's no longer, what should I do with my life? It's simpler than that, and harder. What have I already chosen by choosing nothing? So let's stop moving around the edges of this. How many years have you been figuring it out? Not months, years, count them. And then ask yourself, what exactly has been figured out in that time? What is different now from what it was 2 years ago, besides the number of tabs and the number of notebooks? Here's a more specific question. What would you start tomorrow, not someday, if you already knew it might not work? Not if you had the guarantee. If you had the fear and started anyway. And the one that cuts the deepest, who are you protecting by staying in the search? Because it's not about clarity. Clarity doesn't come before commitment. It comes after. Everybody who has ever built anything real built it without full clarity. They moved anyway. The clarity arrived in the motion, not before it. You already know what the next step is. You've probably known for a while. The searching hasn't been hiding it from you. It's been keeping you at a comfortable distance from it. So, the question is not what to do. The question is what you're going to do with the fact that you already know. Elena told her sister she was going to start the project. Not someday, this month. She had already picked the name, already sketched the outline, already imagined the first 3 steps with enough detail that it felt almost real. Her sister smiled. You've been saying that for 2 years, she said. Not mean, just accurate. Elena felt the air leave the room. This time is different, she said. Her sister didn't argue. She just nodded in the way people nod when they've decided not to say more. That nod was worse than any argument. Here's what that scene reveals. The people around you have already adjusted to your pattern. They've built your searching into their model of who you are. They've stopped expecting a rival. Not because they don't believe in you, but because the evidence, accumulated over years, points in one direction. The environment already knows the shape of your avoidance. That's not judgment from the outside. That's information. Here's what this whole pattern has been building toward. Not the open tabs, not the 14 notebooks, not the box under the bed. Those are symptoms. The actual thing, the thing underneath all of it, is a question you've been avoiding with extraordinary precision for years. Not, what should I do with my life? That's the decoy question, the one that sounds urgent but keeps you safely inside the search. The real question is quieter, and it cuts deeper. Who am I if I stop searching? Because the search gave you something, an identity, a posture, a way of being in the world that felt like forward motion without requiring the exposure that forward motion actually demands. You became the person who is figuring it out, and that person is protected. that person has an excuse that never expires. But identity built on searching eventually costs more than it protects. Every year you remain in the search is a year your life runs on provisional terms. You're not quite here yet. You're still arriving. And the people around you, the ones who have watched the notebooks fill and empty, the tabs open and close, they've already adjusted their expectations accordingly. That adjustment is the cost, made visible finally. So the only question left is the one Sartre always comes back to. Not what you're going to do, who you're choosing to be, right now, before you're ready, before the fear leaves, before the clarity arrives. That choice was always yours. You just kept searching for someone to make it for you. There's a book that sits inside this exact tension. Not a solution, not a roadmap. Luciana Santos wrote, O acordo esquecido, for the specific person who has already understood the pattern and still hasn't moved. 30 days, one commitment at a time, not consumption, something closer to confrontation with yourself, in the only place the search can't follow you, the present moment. The link is in the pinned comment. If what you heard today landed somewhere real, not comfortable, but real, this channel exists for exactly that. Subscribe. Not because the next video will fix something, because the pattern we named today has more than one face, and you'll want to see the others. One question before you go, not a general one, a specific one. What is the thing you already know you need to start? The one you've been researching instead of doing? Leave it in the comments, not as a confession, as a commitment. Something small enough to be real, something you can do before this week ends. Because the search ends the moment you name what comes next. And naming it here, out loud, where someone else can read it, is already a different kind of choice than the ones you've been making.